You're listening to the Out of the Box podcast with Timmy, Halisa, and Sinosure.
Welcome to Out of the Box, and I'm Halisa. We have Duro, Timmy, and Sinosure. And today is an amazing day. We also have a guest. Special welcome to our guest, Hetty Dre. Thanks for joining us today. And it's going to be an amazing one. Hello. So Hetty Dre, please, in fact, just start the introduction. Everybody's familiar with the other people. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Alisa, Timmy, and Senator. Thank you.
We're very, very glad to have you. Today we'll be having conversations around what's happening in the Sahel region. So, the Sahel region, as you all know, is all of those, countries under the Sahara Desert. A lot has been going on. The region has been tense for a little bit. So, that's the conversation we'll be having today. Guys, Sinosure and Duro to me. Can you join in the conversation, and you can introduce yourself if you want to, but people are already very familiar with you. So let's talk about everything that's happening in the region. But I think today we're trying to look at the coup, the TAS that has been happening, and also, conversations around neo-colonialism, like what's happening in the 21st century. Why are these regions continually having a sort of like a brutal takeover of power? So those are the conversations we'd have today.
Come on. Is it really brutal? Huh? Be serious. Where exactly have we seen the so-called brutality? I beg you. It doesn't seem as such, right? Of course, what is going on across the Sahel, particularly in Africa, looks like a hell of a thing there, in the real sense, considering the history that we've had of military takeover in Africa, and then of course what is usually the case whenever we hear military takeover. So particularly for me, I find it unpalatable when you said brutal. I don't know, maybe Duro Timmy or Etidre has got a different perception or perspective, let me say, to the whole conversation. I have not seen anything brutal, especially this last one. Can we hear you, Etidre?
I don't think there is any debate about whether it's brutal or not, because brutality is actually a relative term. If we are suffering under the poverty that is occasioned by the instability we have across Sahel, you might see the entire episode as brutal. So brutal is not just the open force that we know. So I don't think we should focus too much on whether it is brutal or not. More than 50% of the population is actually living in poverty. And when I talk about poverty, I'm talking about real poverty. They face the climate change issue affects them more than the people in the coastal countries. So I think one can say it is brutal in that sense, in the broad sense of the word. So over to you, my people.
Thank you. But why I said that is because of the initial perception someone would have. If someone say coup, you would think of military, like, taking somebody, it's taking over power. And that sight alone in people's mind is a brutal one. And so maybe deliberately or not, I think I've done this a little bit. Like I will say these things and I'll come back to it and I'll say it's actually true, because the perception that people have when they hear of like military coup is not one of, okay, let's shake hands, let's do such let's smile. It's not usually not like that, right? So that's also like one of the things. And there's a lot of conversations around it. Like many people are even trying to bring the conversation of if coup can be democratic. So it's a lot. Like, so let's see how you want to guide the conversation. Also, like there's been a lot that is going on. So I just want to hear maybe your initial take on why you think that coup d'etats are still happening in Africa. Like, even in this century, this current century, because when you hear about the ones that have happened previously, it's like the one that happened maybe in USSR or even before USSR or something like that, if there was anything like that in the Soviet Union or in Iran, very, very long time ago. Sometimes it seems like it's such an outdated thing, like why is it still happening in Africa? So you can link it to the underdevelopment, but so that those conversations, like why are we having coups in Africa at this particular point in time? That's my initial question. I want to pick your brains on that.
I will say first off, right? Of course, without butting in too much today. I would say first off, we might need to first look at the governmental structure along the places or in the places where we have been seeing this coup. It just doesn't make sense, right? For something that generally there is a consensus that, of its not so palatable nature to happen in places over time, and there's been no way out of it. So while I was trying to properly get a hang of the whole thing, some of the things that came to mind, and I would also like to clarify that with Etty, thankfully he is knowledgeable about subjects around like this, is the fact that don't you think the military men are just taking their own share of the spoils? Because it will seem like the current political arrangement, especially in Africa, is such where the elites, some so-called political elites, are just sharing positions among themselves so that they can have their bite of the common patrimony of the people. So now you have some people as well that are elites and they are in the military. Like the man in Niger, for instance, I am aware that he's been there as the head of presidential guard for more than 20 years. I think based on the stories and the information that are trickling out of that space, he has also, as a matter of fact, participated in being the head of guard for more than 5 presidents in Niger Republic. So if you are looking for the elite, political elite within that structure, it makes sense to see him as one of them. So if you guys, you have been eating, you've been enjoying yourself, you've been flexing all along, maybe it's time for me to eat too. Perhaps until we leave we develop a political system wherein service is at the heart of everything, then you will see that the attraction that is there, this kind of allure to force your way in, like there's a man in Nigeria who said, chase them, hijack it. There were lines of words that were used, and people were even debating, like, is this right? He said, power is not given a la carte. So I just think that nature of our political environment in itself encourages coup. The elites in the military, we just wanted to have their own shares of the spoil. Or what do you think, Florist?
I think people like to tackle visible symptoms, and always like to forget the root cause, because it's always cause and effect. We do it cause and effect. So people like to get focused on the effects, because most times the effects are more visible than the causes. So, and I think it should always be holistic. That's why I really say so. It's not just castigating or criticizing something, but if you are not active in criticizing the cause or try to stop the cause, then I just think it's not sincere. But anyways, don't let me. I don't know how the circle is. I don't know how it's working. So let me just move for now. Thank you.
The question I threw was like, why are we having coup in Africa at this current time? It might seem very, very it might seem like a very obvious answer. Yeah, development, like it's connected directly, but there's a lot of areas that are underdeveloped. But now that it comes to my mind, I think there was also something similar like that in Myanmar. So, because I was trying to say, there are underdeveloped countries that are still pretty manageable, but it seems like it's something that we're seeing it go around these Sahel regions like a tsunami, and I think that a lot of countries are tensed. So just trying to bring it back home. But Hetty, let's have you now before we go back around.
Okay, I think for me there are many reasons. There are historical reasons. So for instance, if you are speaking specifically to Sahel, you have to look at the historical reason as tied to neo-colonialism in the Sahel. And I'm speaking about the French exploitation of the Sahel region. That exploitation itself creates instability in that region. Because what it simply means is that even though many of those countries have flag independence, their economy is tied to exploitation by the French interests. That's on one side. On the second side, for the history angle, is the concept of the military on the African continent. All the military forces that we have on the African continent were created by the colonial marauders, and they were created to suppress the people, and they were more powerful than the people when they were created. So you now have a situation where after independence, an institution that was more powerful than the people, that was created to suppress and oppress the people, will now have to bow down to civilian authority. So there is always that clash too, where ultimately those people just feel like we can do it better. So there is that angle. But there is also a modern angle for me, which are for science specifically, the question of climate change. Because of the climate change angle, for instance, apart from the ordinary exploitation of resources, mineral resources, we now have a situation where more and more people are being pummeled by climate, by desertification. I think that's what is the major problem in the Sahel. And that is reducing people's access to resources. Lake Chad, for instance, is drying up. So that means many people that rely on Lake Chad as an economic lifeblood, they are suffering, they have to get somewhere. So that also is creating anger. The fall of Libya is also a recent development that allows the movement of arms and ammunition across Sahel, apart from what we have said, the failure of the leadership. So I think once we have that kind of a broad mindset, we know why coup is happening in the Sahel for now, and why, to some extent, many of the coastal cities or countries are protected for now, but it's coming down ultimately, because all these factors too, they are there even in the coastal countries. Thank you guys. Let me just stop there for now.
I mean, that's a very good angle. Climate change. I know we've heard like the recharge Lake Chad. But I mean, and Chad is currently under military rule, right? So that's an interesting angle. I've not heard anybody really talk about climate change in that light. And you know, that's yeah. What do you guys have to say about that? About any other thing that you want to add? Anyone can Sinusha, let's hear you, or Flyers that you can even speak to us.
So to the question, I think apart from the climate angle, that Hetty brought up, I think, which is very, very valid and is an important factor. I think if I'm trying to look at it politically and from the rule of law angle, I think with the coups happening in so-called democracies or civilian rules, I think first is have to, look into how the countries were when they were practicing the democracy, So, how democratic really was it? Because people always forget the importance of rule of law, and people always think rule of law institutions that are meant to be for justice is determined just by the harshness of the policy or of the punishments or how scary it is, But people always know that that's not necessarily all that matters. It's not just about having the facility to punish, but it's about how diligently and fairly you are taking out the justice and how enthusiastic you are to find justice and make sure rule of law is enforced, fairly, because that affects psychic of people, and then that's what solidifies rule of law and institutions, and then that's what makes it even harder for all those kind of things to happen, because people know that okay, the institutions are getting stronger, so it's a ripple effect, But once the ruling class themselves know this the rule of law is weak, the mentality of people don't respect it, It's easy for anything that I think undemocratic, because that's already the principle for me for foundation of democracies. And once that is lost, it's just the name. It's just you calling a dog a cat and saying because you said it's a cat, then it's a cat, but not trying to tick the boxes of what a dog should be and what a cat should be. And that's really the issue with the so-called democracies and why it's easy for them to have coups, because it's like you can call it democracy. It's just civilian rules. rule, and I like to say with the civilian rule that we have, the highest, what really gives the president the power, really is his highest title. We are the chief commander in chief of the armed forces, so you don't want military rule, but what really gives the president power is the military force, quote, and that's why he's now in charge of the military, so it's just that now everyone else also has, it's just not solely military, and that's just really the difference to me, because the foundation of the democracy is not really there, so it's very easy for anything to come through, and that's what I think, and basically.
Okay, if I get that succinctly put, you are saying, one, the very foundation upon which a democratic society should be built, if it's faulty, like we have in most of the sub-Saharan African countries, especially along the West African coast to the Sahel, if it's faulty, then anything can give, anything can take. And then very importantly as well, you also hinted at something. I want to be sure that's what you mean. That in a case where what gives people the right to perpetuate themselves in office is the fact that they are the grand commander of the Federal Republic, or they are the chief commander of the armed forces, or they are one military head or the other, even though they are wearing a civilian dress, if the legitimacy is not coming from the majority of the people, then anything can give. I mean, it can give and anything can take, if I'm getting you right, which to me, right, makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you very much. Did I get you right? Please fly faster.
Oh yeah, absolutely, perfectly put. That's really, I think, summarized it for me. Thank you.
All right. I mean, we do this a lot so that our listeners can get to have a feel of the spirit behind the word, really. The letters kill. They say the spirit gives life. So in that sense, Dorothy, are you there?
I would say that it's been a very eventful week all over Africa, and I would say I'm happy with the conversations that we are having now, because it seems like, majority, maybe besides Nigeria, because it seems like we are the only ones where we have a percentage of our population, speaking from different sides, but I think when I look around the conversation that's going around Africa, that has gone around Africa this week, it's been very pleasing to see, that, Africans are finally, speaking up and speaking out, and with all courage, just like our ancestors, we've gotten that courage again to say, hey, man, you guys, the get out of Africa, and that is what the guys that have taken over in majority of these countries, these West African countries, have been saying that their resources, they are being exploited, and that brings me to the conversation about exploitation, because for me, I it's been we've been going back and forth, on social media and everything, and I think left to me, I just like I said on some other platforms, that I still believe in democracy. I still believe democracy is one of the best systems of government that we have there, because it actually empowers the people to actually speak up. But after taking like a deeper look at it, you find out that, just like you guys have said, when we have imperfect democracy, not even imperfect, because democracy can never be perfect, but we have terrible democracies, that are counterproductive to the idea of what democracy, should stand for. Then there's no way that you will not still have all of this, coups, happening all across Africa. So, and then, when the dynamic of this guy is trying to say, we have to kick out the French, we have to kick out these colonial masters from our country. They are still here, their presence is still heavy, they are still exploiting us, we are still living in perpetual poverty, our people are not benefiting. That excites me as an African, to see that that's really happening right now. So I think that's basically it for me on this issue. I am more on the side of exploitation and kicking out these guys from Africa.
See, I think why are you all being so timid? I know what you all think about this topic. Dorothy, are you like, what is happening? Okay, let me even bring it down to specifics. So there are many people that have this whole opinion, or no, not even an opinion. There's a very well formed thought around democracy and military, right? Or democracy versus military that we've been having. They say like 1,000. What's it called? The worst form of democracy is better than the best form of military, right? So there's this, conversation, and we've heard of it. So there's this thing around this topic that I feel like we're kind of too timid about it. So let's actually, even myself, like even going into this, I'm like, how honest do I want to be about this conversation? Because like you said, you guys have brought up like really good angles. Like we've gone from climate change, and we've gone we've gone to the point of like rule of law not being upheld the way it should be, and we've even gone to the point that there are some democratically elected presidents that are being called head of the armed forces. So how is that even, is it just about the name or whatever? So for me, I don't know how honest I want to be about this conversation, because I think that we are at a place now where we don't really know. We've seen a lot of people that are kind of, it seems like they're sympathizing with coup. They're like, at this point, we don't even uphold rule of law. People are arrested anyhow in Nigeria. So what's the difference? People were still speaking during the time that there was military rule. People are speaking now. People are getting arrested, without, being properly charged during the military rule. Same thing is happening now. So what exactly do you think is the difference between, when Nigeria had military rule, or when, some countries had, military rule, and when they had democratic rule? Because it feels like it's looking like there's no huge difference, right? Or is there?
Well, for me, let me. I think I can take this up first. I think that to me, I agree with that statement that 1,000 imperfect democracies is better than military rule, because in under the democratic rule, we have the ability to speak out. Yes, there are some things that you will not be able to say under any military government, and we have the ability to. I mean, like, if it wasn't for democracy, I think a whole lot of us that are very outspoken about the issues of this country, we would not dare to do it. So I do not support coups. I don't support the military. But for me, there's a scale of preference. Scale of preference is, we Africans have been exploited for too long. We've been exploited. We are down there. So as I have a belief system and I believe in democracy, but then there's a scale of preference, because, and I can also shove that my belief to one side for now, because even the democracy that we're having is not perfect. It's very faulty. We have a scenario, like if I use Nigeria as an example, where court orders are not obeyed, where the people don't benefit from don't really enjoy the democracy the way it should be enjoyed. The freedom is not there, but it is not still as bad as the military, because we had some of the worst times in this country under the military. So there's a difference. We know that there's a difference. But when I talked about scale of preference, for someone like me, human rights is at the top of that scale. So if it was to be that these soldiers are saying, oh yeah, we want to kick out the French, we want to kick out colonial masters, we want to kick out corrupt politicians that are the what do they call them again? They call them, what they call those people who are puppets, the puppets of the West, right? But in doing that, you're now abusing your people. We are seeing gross human rights violation. Then I will not support you. All right. So for me, it is human rights first. Kicking these guys out and making sure that our resources benefit us as Africans, right, is on the second scale of that preference before we can now talk about the democracy that is not even really democracy. I mean, look at the elections that we have in Nigeria. We have elections where people can come out and tell you that you should not, don't come out to vote if you're from a certain tribe. You have things that they even do to smaller political parties even before the major election, the way they sideline them, the way they don't have that equality. There's no equality. Like, I can't just come out to say, even if I have better ideas than these guys that are there, even if I have, better things to offer to the people, I can't just come out and say I want to run for office. So all of the democracy that we have, where people just get picked up, people get arrested anyhow, it's not really perfect. So I can shove that. Even though I believe that democracy is the best system, and even if it is flawed, it is 10,000 times better than what we would experience under the military regime. But because of what the dynamic that is in this conversation, which is in making sure that Africans are not continually exploited by these guys, the West, right? That is what will make a lot of people, and that is where the military guys, for now, to me, that's where they are winning the narrative. Politics is all about narrative, and what they're doing is politics, but at the same time, but the narrative that is there is helping them, right now. So that's what I have to say. But
okay, for me, I would just try to clarify certain things, because I think we conflate meanings of words. Number one, there is democracy. So we make an argument that democracy is better than any form of military government. I think the argument is correct. But there is also what we call civilian rule. Civilian rule is not synonymous to democracy. Electioneering is not synonymous to democracy. So what we call democracy in many parts of Africa, even in the world, are not democracy. They are just civilian rule. And what I see by my own reckoning is that we have a civilian rule that has actually committed a coup against democracy. So what you claim to be democracy for many people is not democracy. Yes, I can give it to you that civilian rule guarantees certain civil liberties and rights that many military governments might not guarantee. But civil liberty and rights is just like when slavery ended in the US. And the slaves were told, now you are free. You can go ahead and live a free life. But they didn't have access to land. They don't have access to anything. So what freedom is that? It's a freedom to go hungry. It's a freedom to go beggarly. So when we talk about this freedom, we have to put it in context. Is it the freedom just to speak that we are talking about? So many civilian governments that we have on an African continent, they are not democracy. They are not democratic. They are actually committing their own coup against the democracy that they are begging for. What I see civilian government is just like people just coming together, powerful people coming together. That instead of using gun to get to power, can we organize election among ourselves and choose who wins through electoral process? Thank you.
I mean, I like that distinction, civilian rule and democracy. I think that's a very good one. We need to start using that. Like, I think because it's just like a stark difference that we need to say, okay, democracy versus military rule. Be like, let's keep democracy aside. Seems like we've not practiced that in a bit.
Why don't we add a little bit of gloss to it and make it a little bit more shiny? Thank you, Etidre. I always like your perspective. And this is why I would say, right, this kind of information, right, is what people need to have. For instance, when you were talking, it came to mind as well. You said the liberty they allow you. I don't know, maybe this makes sense to anyone. The liberty they allow you is not necessarily a kind of freedom where we arrived at a position of what should be and what should not. It is literally the idea of saying, I still own you, but you are not working on plantation again. You can go and live in Alaska now. You can go and live in Alabama now. You can go towards Tuscaloosa now in Alabama. You can go towards anywhere. But whenever you offend me, I can still put my knee on your neck and suffocate you to death. It doesn't matter, and there won't be justice for you. And I think that's prevailing conversation. And this will now take us to the other angle. Because whenever we are talking about military rule, right, like Alisa was pointing out earlier, one of the justification that the military guys bring is they want to tell you that they are another form of Thomas Sankara. And what they want to do is to liberate you from neo-colonialism, which in itself is a big problem. Now, I was thinking about this topic, and it came to mind as well that there is the place of democracy. And I think, like Etienne said, we need to properly define and contextualize the meaning of the word democracy. Because it will seem that people do not understand that the word in itself is ordinarily a construct of people and power. Now, who are these people? All over the world, anywhere you get to, you see different kind of people orchestrating, as you may want to call it, the kind of liberty or designing the kind of liberty that they will allow the people. For instance, we went from a gold standard kind of currency to a purely fiat kind of currency. When I say fiat now, it's not backed by anything. It is just paper and the supposed authority of a government. And there are some currencies now that are almost becoming a global currency. So it means when those people make their own policies, wherever they are, monetary policy, it impacts the world in its entirety. Now, let's open the window of this conversation. We have opened one window. Let's open the other window so that we can we can get cross ventilation of these ideas. Yeah. Now, I would like to quickly up to fly Rasta. What do you make of neo-colonialism within the context of this coup? Misrule by civilian rulers, like Etidwe will say, because going by Etidwe's espouser now, it will seem to me like there are no democracies in West Africa, or let me say amongst ECOWAS countries. So let's have you, Etidwe. What do you make of a neo-colonialism within the context of this broad range of conversation that we have? Yeah. I would like to have flyers.
I would like to even continue on the premise Etidre, on that tangent anyways, and I think it's something people always conflate. So I always hear it when people make that same phrase. The words the democracy is better than the military rule, but I always say the opposite of democracy is not military. I don't know, so I think we need to understand the things we're saying. The opposite of democracy is either dictatorship, or tyranny, So, but I think we've been fooled or deceived in a way to just think civilian rule automatically means democracy and the military rule automatically means tyranny, because it is not impossible to have a military ruler that can still be democratic in office if we as a people can make provisions for that. So we need to understand when we just say, so that's why I don't really buy that statement because of what it means in its originality. Now people say it in because they are just putting things on it, trying to make military rule automatically look like it is meant to be autocratic, like it cannot be if we can make provisions for that, because then it makes it a bigger conversation, because it now says what kind of people are in your military, why you think they can die for the country, but you think while they are in service they can't do what is right for the country. So, but that's a different argument if we go on that tangent. So that's why we need to understand the thing. So when I want to quickly move into the neo-colonialism aspect and what you asked, I think now when people see civilian rule, automatically they just think it is what they think it is. And when people see the military, people already think what they think it is, And when it comes to taking power, people like to use what would I call things that they know will affect the feelings of the people. So now there's a neo-colonialism angle, but for Africa to break free from neo-colonialism. I think people always think neo-colonialism can only exist with your former colonizers, and I think that's what is usually amazing to me when I see people with the romance with Russia and stuff, you know. And before I quickly go, hope I'm on point to the question before I go on the wrong tangent. Anyways, Sanojo, am I still on? Is that like the perspective of what you're asking for beyond colonialism angle, or?
You are well on course to helping us.
Okay. So, when people, you know, so people automatically think neo-colonialism can only happen with your direct former colonizers, or people aligned with your direct fellow colonizers, you know, and that's why it's easy for people to not see the China, what China's motives are in Africa, or what Russia's motives are in Africa, and people like to, and I know because people are not educated enough in the intricacies, because, and it's very hard, you know, for them to even know the intricacies of these things, because even the surface level thing that they should know to even be able to vote right or do things right, they've never even passed that first base, you know. So now talking to these intricacies for them, you know, and these people, the ruling elites know these things, you know, so they can play to the subtle emotions of the people, because now everyone's waiting for a new Thomas Sankara or a new hard grip, and because mentally part of the neo-colonialism and the colonizers effect has already changed, has warped the minds of black people, in the sense of they see themselves as animals that need strong hand, you know, so they romanticize strong hand, and it's a manifestation. But some people don't know, they just think we just need Nigerians need strong hand, and people say it like they're not Nigerians, you know. So when you say Nigerians need strong hand, they're not just saying it for people, because people like to see someone doing something so extreme and think Nigerians need strong hand, they won't change. But you're talking to yourself too, and you are subconsciously saying that you also need strong hand. So you need to now be introspective, and then just look at why you think you deserve strong hand, why you think the Europeans don't deserve strong hand, why other people don't, why is it you that deserve strong hand, and why do you think without strong hand you won't listen, you know, or you won't be able to do right, you know. Once we can now see these things and trace it back, then we'll be able to realize all these things, and that will take us to the journey and know that, okay, what can emancipate Africa is not military coup or this coup or whatever, or democracy. No, what will emancipate Africa and all African nations is the mind. And when I say the mind, it's not just mind without action, because when people say the mind, it's not just you talking and knowing things that are not going to be practicalized, because the essence of knowledge is knowledge in action, not just knowledge to save. So if you are saving your knowledge and you just know, and you're just a bystander and just a spectator in the events or history happening, then your knowledge is fruitless, because your knowledge, you know, is like talents, and you know the mythological story that was said about talents in the Bible, of how if you don't use your talent, it will be taken from you. So even if your knowledge might not be necessarily taken from you, but it is worthless in the grand scheme of things, because what gives things value is what the things can do. So the value of gold is people seeing what they can use gold for, and what they now extract gold for, or what they use gold for, because or petrol, you know. But don't let me even talk too much about that, you know. So when people have knowledge of things, and they know what they want, and they know their history, and they know that what can save Africa is self-sufficiency in every single way, within the borders and outside the neighboring countries, until that is the major goal of anybody taking leadership, and not saying the West is my enemy, so let me waste precious time to align with another person because it's that person's enemy too, and then forget, you know. And it's like something the Yoruba say, mi ò nítorí ẹran pe màálù ní brother, and which means I want because of meat or beef call a cow my brother, you know, because you want beef, you now say, oh, this cow is my brother. And that's why I see with these coups and how they are just inspiring, giving people some kind of hope or some kind of nostalgia of, oh, Thomas Sankara or this military or Rawlings or whatever, and then try to now liars with the Russians, and you know. So I think if the knowledge angle and perspective and holistic introspective analysis of things, if people are not holistic, if people see things of just one angle and are not willing to get under angles and not just parrot what has been told to them, then I think that's the first step for us combating these things. And to round it up with the original question, with the democracy and military, I think I'm not against military rule, and I prefer personally democracy, you know. So me personally, I prefer democracy because of what it stands for, you know. So I'm not against military rule, because I think if we as a people, we can decide that we can let military or a military man that is in active service be a president in a democratic system, so which might be called a military rule, and these things were not made by God. These things were made and tweaked, and everything can be tweaked. Anyone should have a right to be, because democracy gives everyone the right, of getting to power. But if you're now saying because of job people cannot do it, I don't buy that. So I don't think military rule in its entirety is necessarily bad, but it's the mind of the people, because it's not about if civilian or not. The civilian person, they had no interest of the people. The military person to might not or may have better, So I just think we should just know what these words are and see if they are working, because the action of the words is what determines if it's a democracy or not. But I'll round up in that. Thank you.
Wow. No, let me just quickly say this, because when I was listening to you, like, I feel like a lot of questions came up in my mind, because I mean, maybe in the beginning I was like, okay, it's like in the beginning we sound like, it seems like, are we against democracy? Are we now against military at the same time? But now it's like, all of these things are actually concepts, you can actually have like military existing in democracy. And when there's this like thing that is about, what's it called? Nationalism, right? And it's one of the things that we lack seriously in Nigeria. And sometimes I think that even Sinosho has hinted to the fact that we don't have a Nigerian project, because like we do not maybe have strong allegiance to Nigeria, right? So sometimes when I see the military and I see them maybe existing in some countries, of course there can be a tool, there can be people use them, it exists in different forms. But then when I see the military, sometimes I'm like, they're like the peak of nationalism. They're the ones that like, you see, this Nigeria is my country, like, because they eat, sleep and breathe these things. So sometimes you're like, maybe they are the ones that would actually be able to fight for the country, because they are the ones that live, breathe nationalism. They live and breathe this banner that is called whatever country it is. If it's America, it's America. If it's Nigeria, I think it's Nigeria. So maybe, but Sinosho, you wanted to say something?
I was actually going to say, civilian rule and military rule, to me, they are the same, one and the same. And perhaps until we get a working democracy, right? And I'm not sure we can do democracy halfway. There's no doing democracy halfway, because the idea behind democracy in itself is that the people are ruling. I don't know, maybe this makes sense. So when the people rule, right, in unison, they create an environment where everyone, right? Because if I have input into something, that thing should ordinarily not burn me, except if burning is the only thing that thing can do. I don't know, maybe this makes sense. So when the people chip in their thought, one or two things like that, then the conversation changes to a democracy, because what makes it democracy is the fact that people are able to influence actions and decisions and policies. One other thing that is very close, and I would like us to pick on, of course, we will have to wait on that so that we can take ethics perspective, because I figured he was trying to speak earlier. I want to see what he thinks, of course, particularly about what Flyvaster had touched on just some minutes ago.
No, because life itself is a process. So I think we must only speak in the gray area. It will have to be nuanced in our discussion. So for instance, because I grew up under military rule in Nigeria, I just don't like military rule for any reason. Because unlike the civilian rule where give or take maybe 1,000 people are ruling us, under military rule maybe you have about 100 people ruling you. And the more concentrated power is, the more abuse it will be subjected to. Like they say, absolute power corrupt absolutely. So I'm no for military, but I don't moralize it. So if a civilian government is failing its people, is not improving their material condition, destroying their economy, if I like, let me preach from now till forever. It will not stop military from taking over, because it's not about preaching. For me, the antidote to military rule is actually for the civilians that are ruling to deliver to their people. That's the only antidote. It's not by preaching to them. So whether I like military or not, what will bring about military intervention into the governance system of any country is the failure of the political system. And somewhere I used this example. 2 years ago, during the election in the US between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they had to force the military to even come out in the US to say, no, they are not going to intervene. They are just going to stand down, because the political system was also breaking down in the US. So it might sound somehow to people that even in the US, people are talking about military intervening. So military will always intervene because they are the iron fist that hold the political system. So except you are able to prove to them that the political system is strong enough to hold the leash on the military boys, they will always intervene. So for them not to intervene, you must deliver good governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But now that we are talking about two things in a way, like coup or neo-colonialism. So I just want to like bring a question to like bring the two together, right? Do you think Africa can liberate itself, actually free themselves from colonial masters and colonial rule without military force, without any sort of force? Is there a room for some kind of like, should I say diplomacy? That's just, I want to throw it around the house, please, everybody. So we just like bring in the two, this thing together, since we've tried to, have nuanced or balanced argument.
For me, I think Africa will liberate itself by itself and first, and also if collectively Africa wants to liberate itself, definitely military assistance will definitely be needed. And when I say military assistance, not just like as just as giving orders, but there will be countries that will be under military rule that will also join in the revolution that's going to happen. So I think they are important, because if I'm going through history in Africa, part of the fighters or part of the revolutionaries, a military person is involved, and we don't know what, if he was alive, if he was there for 30 years, maybe he would have gone rogue or not. But at least with the evidence before us, we could see how in 4 years he was able to at least keep true to what he was saying, and we could see that his words were not just for rhetoric, but there were plans in motion to actualize those words. So I think the history always it might not necessarily repeat itself or anything, but I don't think any option should be seen as no, never, because we should be looking at the realities of the issue, not what we are already projecting on those issues. So I think military will always be, because in this kind of in to liberate yourself or as a group, you need every part of your society, because every part of your society is necessary if you truly want to be, so the words of the people, are needed. So because people like to look like anyone is not useful, because what keeps nations now in the type of capitalistic world we're living in, what keeps nations powerful are them making sure they have people that are crazy enough to be mass murderers, which they can call special soldiers. So it's romanticized and we are made to accept it as reality, because he was just giving orders, it can't default and all that, like he's not a human being. So they have become, we try to justify it because we know that is needed, so we can deal with that and not knowing. But when it now comes to other things, you think, this person that we've trained, this maniacs that we've trained, no, we don't need them. They are good for all the other people. So but we need to realize that for a society to liberate itself, the worst and the best, everyone has a part to play, as long as you can make everyone be focused on one goal. And one of the goal is the liberation of Africans. So if you are the worst military, you are the craziest killer, a military guy in one country, you like to, but you are still Pan-African. For the time being, you need to know that this time, you need to know that this is not a morality battle. This is a battle of liberation. So everyone will come on board. That's for me personally.
Really interesting conversation. I think that we as Africans, my own concern, what I just want to speak on is even the whole thing of some African countries like Nigeria, being used as a tool to pull back or try or to stop the liberation that I don't want to say the liberation that is about to happen, because I think our eyes should still be open to see what these guys are really doing, if they are really walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Like some people have suggested, it's not just enough to dress like Thomas Sankara, and it's you have to really show it that you are for your people, and you are really doing, because besides that, I don't see any other reason why, if the military should take over. At best, if the military are truly in favor of the people, they can stand down, they can decide, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, it is the military that is still being used to clamp down on the people. These are leaders, who are elected or selected, as some might say. They don't come directly with a knife to your house. It is the military, it is the police and other armed forces that they use to trample down on the people, right? So if the military is really in favor of the best, or really wants the best for Africa, I believe that we should see it. We should see these things being. I saw a video today of the Niger leaders in a stadium, and the same thing that we saw in, was it Burkina Faso, one of those other countries, Mali or so. The same script acting out, like they're in a stadium and the people are happy and everything. Yeah, okay, that's nice. But at the same time, let us see these things starting to come to play. So and we need to see it fast, so that we don't get ourselves in more trouble. But I'm really concerned, that some African countries like Nigeria, where our leaders don't have any sort of consciousness, and or that any sort of consciousness like we have right now, to say, oh, Africa should be free. You could even hear some of their supporters saying a lot of stuff that it doesn't matter, but at the same time, that's my concern, and I do hope that countries like Nigeria and Ghana and the rest of the countries that are under ECOWAS, would not be used as a tool to prevent the liberation of Africa, because it needs to happen, and we should be glad that this is even happening in our lifetime. So, like Fly Rasta has said, I really agree with what he said. Everyone has a role to play. Enough is enough of us reading history books and celebrating other people. We have an opportunity right now to add our voices, to add our efforts into the conversation, and to push for the liberation of Africa. And I think that with all of the education that we have right now, we are more than capable. The only thing that we need to talk about, maybe on a subsequent episode, is technology. We are not going to liberate ourselves without technology. It's not going to happen, because when you look at, even if we say the military should join in, when you look at it, the weapons that they have was sold to them by who?
That's
the same guys that we're trying to free ourselves from. So what's to tell you that these guys don't have?
Like military, they are not just fighting with what's it called, AK-47 or like, I don't know, machete or something.
The Wagner group you're talking about is another.
No, because
should
I
we
think
be
you're
going from
speaking
the
of
west
technology
to
and military in isolation.
That's what we're talking about.
Technology,
so I think
we can fight with technology. Like if the military is like,
yeah. No. I was speaking as and I was saying the military, they need technology. The jets they're going to use to fight, the weapons they're going to use, it's all technology. And what they have so far are things that have been supplied to them by the West, and that is the unfortunate situation. So what's to tell you that if these guys, okay, let's take out Russia from the picture. If these guys decide to clamp down on us in Africa today, take out Russia, can Africa stand alone and defend itself, military for weapon, whatever it takes? So I think that we should start having that conversation around technology. Make sure that I don't want to even bring that in. Make sure that Wakanda is not just a movie, but a reality where we have technology to defend ourselves from these people, because we're not going to. So all of our people all across the world need to pay attention to Africa. Whatever you've learned, whatever and even those people who are here who have those knowledge already, need to find a way that we have the technological know-how to build weapons, because you're not going to defend yourself with talk. You're going to need to have weapons that can stop these guys from coming into to Africa. We need to look at ourselves. Like, this podcast is still going to be posted to a platform owned by the West, and those are some of the problems that we're talking about. We should look inwards. We should have African platforms. We should have African social media. We need to until you are ready to do that. I think we are still a long walk from freedom, except we want to depend on the conscience of the West, where you tell them leave us alone, and they'll just feel like, oh, I'm going to leave you guys alone, because I feel like it's bad for my image.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to put what you're saying.
So that's just my little contribution to this. Yeah.
So let's have Sino show.
If there is anything that we should take home, right, is that I would like that we are in a place where we have this convergence of idea. Ideas might be different, but at some point we need to bring everything back home. What exactly is the goal? Right? When we started the conversation, we painted a picture. I did paint a picture that what we have currently is a free for all. Thank you, Flymaster, for giving me that line. Wherein the civilian rulers and rulership, right, is not particularly tied to the military. Civilian rulers, right, are calling the shot. They are having a feed day. So the military guys too, we find that attractive, or might find it attractive. So we might need to continue to look at that, and then of course think about it. Of course, before we leave, we would also like to take Tidre's thoughts, Virikan Flymaster's thought in pattern, and then of course move away for the day. From there, Tidre, let's have you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me once again. It's been wonderful discussing with you guys. But my own parting shot is this: neo-colonialism, we are not just fighting in Western or Eastern interest. We are fighting their collaborators on the continent, and they are the real guys we have to fight. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's lovely. I think that's the take home. Their collaborators, over here. Thank you very much. All right, guys. It's been a wonderful episode, and do well to follow us on all of our social media platforms, which will be written in the description. And Hetidre, Flyers, thank you for coming on board, and I do hope that you join us, some other time, so we can tap from that wisdom and knowledge that you guys always bring.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Yes, and Africa, nobody is coming to save you.
I am coming.
Yay. We'll save. Oh, yes, Father Christmas.
You're listening to the Out of the Box podcast with Timmy, Halisa, and Sinosure.